There are days in this job where you have to dig. You have to really scrape through the bottom of the barrel, connect the dots, read between the lines, and try to piece together the corruption. Because they're usually smart enough to hide it. They usually bury it in redactions or disguise it with legal jargon, or at the very least, lie to your face with a straight face. But then there are days like today, days where they don't just say the quiet part out loud, they put it in a court filing, sign it, and hand it to a federal judge. I'm looking at this and I genuinely have to ask, are they this arrogant or are they just this sloppy? Because what we are looking at in Brown v. Trump isn't just a smoking gun, it's a mushroom cloud. We are talking about the firing of the NTSB Chief, the National Transportation Safety Board. And look, I get it. I know that doesn't sound sexy. It's not a scandal involving a hush money payment or a secret server. It's infrastructure. It's boring. But that boring agency is the only reason you don't have to pray every time you step onto a Boeing 737. They are the independent investigators who show up when trains derail, when bridges collapse, when pipelines burst. Their entire existence is predicated on one thing: independence. They answer to the facts, not the president. So Trump fires the chief. That's bad enough. That breaks the norms right there. But the way they're defending it, that is where this goes from political overreach to legal nightmare. I want you to look at page 13 of the administration's own filing. Just look at it. They didn't argue that the chief was incompetent. They didn't argue there was misconduct. They didn't even try to manufacture a fake scandal about emails or inefficiency. No. The Trump legal team explicitly states that the termination was without cause. Without cause.
Do you realize what that means? In a court of law, words matter. Specificity matters. By admitting there was no cause, they are effectively arguing that the president doesn't need a reason. They are arguing that the laws Congress passed to protect these safety officials, laws specifically designed to stop a president from firing someone just because they refused to cook the books on a crash investigation, simply do not apply to Donald Trump. It's almost laughable if it wasn't so dangerous. It's like getting pulled over for speeding, and instead of saying, "I didn't see the sign," you look the cop in the eye and say, "I saw the sign, I just decided it doesn't apply to me because I drive a nice car." This is a confession. That is what page 13 is. It is a signed confession that they are purging the government of independent oversight, not because the people are bad at their jobs, but precisely because they are good at them. They fired the NTSB chief because they don't want someone who cares about safety. They want a rubber stamp. And the fact that they are willing to put "without cause" on the official record tells you everything you need to know about their confidence. They're not scared of the courts. They're not scared of Congress. And they certainly aren't scared of the consequences for your safety. And if you think this stops at the NTSB, you haven't been paying attention. This is just the opening salvo. So let's peel this back. Let's look at the mechanics of exactly what just happened, because the details here matter. The details are where the democracy actually dies.
The case is Brown versus Trump. The plaintiff is Alvin Brown. Now, who is Alvin Brown? Is he some deep state operative lurking in the shadows? Is he a partisan hack? No. He is a confirmed member of the National Transportation Safety Board. He was nominated, he went through the Senate confirmation process, and he was appointed to a fixed 5-year term that was not supposed to end until December 31st, 2026. I want you to remember that date, December 26th. That is a contract. That is a statutory promise made by the United States Congress that this person will serve their term unless they screw up. But on May 5th, 2025, Alvin Brown gets an email. It's not a long email. It's not a detailed report of his failings. It comes from the White House Presidential Personnel Office, specifically a guy named Trent Morse, and it essentially says, "You're done. Get out. Effective immediately." Now, here is where we have to put on our lawyer hats for a second, because the law governing the NTSB is not ambiguous. It is not vague. It is 49 U.S. Code Section 1111. You can look it up right now.
Subsection C of that law deals with removal, and it says very clearly, the president may remove a member for inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance in office. Do you see the word only implied there? That list is exhaustive. Inefficiency, neglect of duty, malfeasance. That's it. Those are the 3 keys to the door. If you don't have one of those keys, you cannot open the door and kick the person out. This is what we call for-cause protection. Congress created this specifically so that safety regulators wouldn't have to worry about political retaliation. If you are investigating a train derailment caused by a donor to the president, you need to know that you can tell the truth without losing your job. That is the entire point of the NTSB.
So, when the Trump administration fired Alvin Brown, did they cite inefficiency? No. Did they cite neglect of duty? No. Did they accuse him of malfeasance? Absolutely not. In fact, in the court filing, specifically on page 13 of the documents filed in Brown versus Trump, the administration's defense basically boils down to this: we don't need a reason. They are arguing that the statute itself, the law written by Congress and signed by a previous president, is unconstitutional because it restricts Donald Trump's power. They are invoking this fringe legal theory called the Unitary Executive, which is a fancy way of saying the president is the king. They believe that Article 2 of the Constitution gives the president absolute, unchecked power to fire anyone in the executive branch, regardless of what Congress says, regardless of the term limits, and regardless of the law. And here's the kicker. Alvin Brown was the only black member of the board. He was fired while other members, including a white Democrat whose term had actually expired, were allowed to stay on. So you have this toxic cocktail of potential discrimination mixed with the brazen illegal power grab. But focus on the legal argument, because that is what affects every single one of us. When they admitted in court that they fired him without cause, they were essentially asking the judiciary to strike down the concept of independent agencies entirely. They are asking the courts to rule that the Federal Reserve, the SEC, the NTSB, the FTC, all of these independent bodies that stabilize our economy and keep us safe are actually just arms of the Trump campaign? And let's play the game we always have to play. Let's do the hypocrisy check. Imagine for 1 second that Joe Biden had fired a Trump-appointed safety inspector just because he felt like it. Imagine if Biden fired the head of the FBI or the NTSB without cause and told the Supreme Court, "I'm the president, I do what I want." Fox News would have melted down. The impeachment papers would have been drafted before the sun went down. Republicans in Congress would be screaming about tyranny and dictatorship. But now, silence. Absolute silence from the so-called constitutional conservatives, because for them, the Constitution isn't a set of rules, it's a weapon to be used against their enemies and ignored when it gets in their way. Alvin Brown followed the rules. He did his job. There is zero evidence he did anything wrong, but he was fired because he stood in the way of a president who believes that loyalty to him is more important than loyalty to the public. And if you think they're going to stop with Alvin Brown, you are living in a fantasy world. This is the test case. This is them checking the perimeter fence for weaknesses. If the courts let this slide, if page 13 stands, then no independent official is safe. But here is the thing. Here is the part that should keep you up at night. If you think this is just about Alvin Brown, if you think this is just about one guy at the NTSB who got a raw deal, you are missing the forest for the trees. Because Alvin Brown is not an anomaly. He is not a one-off. Alvin Brown is a data point in a trajectory that has been plotted for years. This isn't an accident. This is a strategy. It is a calculated, systematic dismantling of the very concept of accountability. And we know this because we have seen the movie before. We saw the trailer for it during the first term, and now they are screening the full feature film.
Do you remember the war on the watchdogs? Because I do. Let's rewind the tape. Go back to 2020. In the span of just a few months, Donald Trump fired or removed 5 inspectors general. 5. These are the internal police officers of the government. They are the ones who make sure taxpayer money isn't being stolen and that laws aren't being broken. He fired Michael Atkinson, the Intelligence Community Inspector General. Why? Because Atkinson did his job and forwarded the whistleblower complaint about the Ukraine call to Congress. He followed the law, so he had to go. He fired Steve Lenick, the State Department Inspector General. Why? Oh, coincidentally, he was investigating Mike Pompeo for misusing government resources and bypassing Congress to sell arms to Saudi Arabia. He got too close to the truth, so he had to go. He removed Glenn Fine, who was supposed to oversee the trillions of dollars in COVID relief money. And what happened after he was removed? We saw massive fraud in the PPP program. Billions of dollars wasted. Do you see the pattern? Every single time an independent official tries to act as a check on power, they are purged. It is a reflex. It is the Friday Night Massacre on loop. But what is happening with the NTSB right now is actually worse than the Inspector General firings, because back then they at least tried to dance around it. They used vague language about losing confidence. But now, with this Schedule F mindset that they have been salivating over for years, they aren't dancing anymore. Remember Schedule F? That was the executive order at the end of the first term. The plan to strip civil service protections from tens of thousands of career employees. The goal was to turn nonpartisan experts, scientists, statisticians, safety regulators, into political appointees who could be fired at will. Biden rescinded it, but the philosophy didn't die. It just went into hibernation. And now, with the firing of the NTSB chief, we are seeing Schedule F in practice, even if they aren't calling it that by name yet. They are establishing the precedent that expertise is a fireable offense. Think about what that does to the government. If you're a safety inspector at the FDA looking at a new drug, and you know the president wants it approved because the CEO is a donor, are you going to raise a red flag? Not if you know you'll be fired without cause the next morning. If you were at the EPA and you see a factory dumping chemicals into a river, but the owner is a political ally, do you write the citation? Not if you want to keep your health insurance. This is what they want. They want a yes-man government. They want a government where the only qualification for the job is loyalty to the leader, not loyalty to the Constitution, and certainly not loyalty to the safety of the American people. They are trying to create a unitary executive on steroids. They want to return to a spoils system that we abolished in the 1880s because, surprise, surprise, it led to massive corruption and incompetence. So when you look at that court filing, when you see without cause on page 13, don't just see it as a legal argument. See it for what it really is, a declaration of war on the concept of an independent government. They are telling us, right to our faces, that they intend to hollow out the institutions that keep this country running and fill the empty shells with loyalists. And the scariest part? It's working. Because unless the courts step in and stop this right now, the signal has already been sent to every other official in Washington. Get in line or get out. So where does this road end?
If we look at page 13 of Brown v. Trump and we shrug, if we treat this as just another day in the chaotic news cycle of 2025, what is waiting for us at the bottom of this hill? Because I promise you, it is not just about Alvin Brown losing his job. It is about you losing your safety. We are staring down the barrel of a future where the word accident no longer exists in the government vocabulary. In a world where safety officials serve at the pleasure of the president, every investigation becomes a political negotiation. Imagine the next East Palestine derailment. Imagine the sky turns black with toxic smoke. Families are evacuated and pets are dying. In the old world, the world of law and order, the NTSB would swoop in. They would test the brakes. They would interview the conductors. They would look at the maintenance logs. And if they found that a major railroad corporation cut corners to boost their stock price, they would put that in a report, regardless of how much that corporation donated to the president's super PAC. But in the world they are building right now, in the without cause world, that report doesn't get published. Or if it does, it's redacted. Or worse, the investigator who writes it is fired the next morning for disloyalty, and a new loyalist is installed to write a new report that blames sabotage or human error or anything other than the truth. We are talking about the Sovietization of American infrastructure. We are talking about a system where the truth is secondary to the narrative. And it won't stop at transportation. If the courts validate this unitary executive theory, if they say the president can fire the NTSB chief without cause, there is no legal argument left to stop him from doing the same thing to the Federal Reserve.
Imagine a president firing the chair of the Federal Reserve because he refuses to lower interest rates right before an election. Imagine the inflation that would follow. Imagine the global economic collapse when the world realizes the US dollar is no longer managed by economists, but by political hacks. Imagine the FDA. Fire the scientist who says this drug isn't safe. Hire the guy who says it is. This is the end game. The end game is the total removal of the checks in checks and balances. It is the creation of a government that cannot be corrected, cannot be criticized, and cannot be held accountable because everyone inside the building is too terrified to speak up. And honestly, it's pathetic. It is the behavior of weak men who know their ideas cannot survive scrutiny, so they destroy the scrutinizers. But here is the reality that they don't want you to see. They are doing this because they are banking on your exhaustion. They are banking on the fact that 49 U.S. Code Section 1111 is boring. They are hoping you will scroll past this video, that the media will ignore it, and that Brown versus Trump will slip through the cracks of history unnoticed until it is too late. They want you to look away. Do not give them that satisfaction. Because right now, the only thing standing between us and that future is a handful of judges, a few brave lawyers, and you. The court of public opinion matters. When we shine a light on this, when we make page 13 a headed for them, we force them to retreat. We have seen it happen before. Shame is a powerful tool, but only if we use it. So let's be loud, let's be vigilant, and let's be absolutely clear. We do not work for the president. The president works for us. And we demand a government that tells us the truth, even when, especially when, the truth is inconvenient for the man in the Oval Office.
I'm Ethan Cole, and I'll see you next time.